really excited about micro-internships, about being able to increase the amount of opportunities that are super flexible for our students, especially given that about 70% or more of them work part-time. And so we need flexible, more accessible options. We love that they're also paid. And then from an employer standpoint, we like that they give them employers an opportunity to recruit and kind of connect with students in early talent recruiting. So with that, I will kick it back over to you, Jeffrey, to tell us a little bit about Parker Dewey.
No, thanks so much. And obviously super excited to be here. Few housekeeping notes before we begin. As Amanda said, we are going to be recording the session. We'll be sharing it over email in the coming days, along with all of the slides. Second, the chat is open, as folks know. Feel free to use it along the way with any questions, comments, thoughts, heckling of me if you so choose. If you see me looking over to the right throughout the presentation, I'm just going to try to keep an eye on the chat as we go through, so I can, again, try to answer questions along the way. From an agenda perspective, we're going to hit a few things, and we're going to try to keep this within a half hour. First, we'll give a quick overview of what's going on right now in campus recruiting. We'll talk about what a micro-internship is, for those of you who aren't familiar with it. Then what we're going to do is go through 4 very, very concrete, actionable strategies that everyone on this call can use, irrespective of where they are in the campus recruiting cycle, or even if they're not involved in campus recruiting, but they're just huge fans of Texas State. And then, as I said, we'll leave some time for Q&A. So jumping into it, Parker Dewey, by very quick way of background, we are a 10-year-old organization. We are 100% focused on helping improve college to career through this concept of the micro-internship, these short-term paid professional projects that professionals can give to college students and recent grads. Companies of all sizes, or I should say organizations of all sizes using it, right? Ranging from one-person startups to nonprofits to government organizations to educational institutions, all the way through Fortune 100. And again, it plugs right into what they're already doing in a very easy way. So why do these work for students? Well, this is what we hear from the college students. 75% of them want to begin career exploration during their first or second year in school. But oftentimes they feel like the recruiting events are kind of pushing them away. Yes, they're welcome to come to the career fair, the info session, and organizations host virtual events and the like, but students actually want something more. And they feel like when they're most interested in exploration, they're not getting what they want out of it. They're also saying that the traditional recruiting process isn't working for them. It's not effectively allowing them to demonstrate their skills to employers. And this is why 95% of college students said the best way to recruit them is with these short-term professional experiences. We know at the same time, the employers are facing challenges. They're facing challenges around cost per hire. So according to the National Association of Colleges and Employers, average cost per hire is about $6,000. And that doesn't factor into the other costs of rehiring and internship programs and everything else. They're also saying it's incredibly difficult to assess skills and mutually assess fit. So it's not one-sided, but it's both directions. And that's led to almost 50% first-year turnover in their recent hires. They need a better way to engage and assess. The challenges they're facing is, how do we reach students before we're on campus, before the career fair, the info session, to get interest, to drive engagement? Once we meet the students at those events, how do we keep them engaged afterwards, keep them warm? It might be the first or second year student who they're not yet hiring for internships or full-time roles, but it could also be the junior or senior where you're at the career fair, but you're not going to be doing your on-campus recruiting for another couple weeks or a couple months. They want to know how to get insights onto the candidates, not just around, again, technical skills. Can they code in Python or use Excel, but also those core skills, the communication, problem solving, attention to detail. And for those employers that can't be on campus, whether they're in Texas or elsewhere, and they want to recruit your students, here's a great way to reach them. This is all possible through micro-internships. So micro-internships, and as I said, I'll share the slides, so I want to try to hit this quickly, are short-term paid professional projects that professionals give to college students. And they do it for two primary reasons. One, it's a recruiting tool. It's a way to engage, assess, build those relationships, but they also give them to college students because it's a great way to get help on small projects that we all have on our plate. The projects tend to be 10, 20, 30 hours, so very, very bite-sized and discrete. They tend to take place remote. They also are projects that don't require onboarding or training or access to systems. These are projects that a college student can do on his or her own, irrespective of if they've been onboarded by your organization. And again, using public information. Again, we'll share some examples in a minute. A few other things to note. First of all, the micro interns for the duration of the projects are not your employees or contractors. They're on Parker Dewey's books. Again, we want it to be easy. We don't want you stressing out about W-2s or 1099s or anything else. And to the extent you're working with a micro intern who down the road you want to hire for a summer internship or full-time role, there's no cost or fee associated with it. It's not like a staffing firm. The other thing I want to highlight is micro internships aren't really like internships. It's a little bit of a misnomer. They're much more like a recruiting tool. So if you think about the full-time role as getting married, the summer internship like getting engaged, micro internships are like a job date. They're like going to the career fair, the info session, or an interview where you're able to engage and get real insights on someone, again, earlier in the process, but without the commitment of the engagement. So again, it's a complement to it, not a replacement. But as opposed to it being hypothetical, let's give some real examples. So one of the things we do at Parker Dewey is we will take job descriptions from companies' full-time roles and make suggestions of micro internships that can be used both to engage the students and drive interest, again, the proverbial carrot, if you will, but also to get those employers insights onto their skills. So in this example, a company sent us an entry-level data marketing role. Again, you can see the job description on the left, at least the meat of it. And one of the things that jumped out is, let's have a college student do a competitive campaign analysis. Again, a great way that aligns to the full-time role. It's something a college student can do on his or her own without, again, access to data, without onboarding, using public info. And yeah, first of all, maybe it helps someone on the marketing team who's trying to get that competitive analysis done, but just doesn't have time. But it's also a way to see the students, both technical skills around market research, but also core skills like creative thinking or presentation. This can work for roles on manufacturing floors. So this company was looking for students studying robotics and mechatronics. Again, a micro internship, you're not going to put someone on a factory floor working with a multi-million-dollar piece of dangerous equipment, but let's have them do something around best practices for the use of a specific piece of equipment, or generate a training manual. Again, great if they actually need the manual developed, but this company was using it to, again, very quickly assess the skills, both the technical skills, but things like timeliness or organization or communication or critical thinking. All of these things got teased out earlier in the recruiting process. It could also be an IT development role. The thing I love about this project is this organization was using it not just to reach the computer science students, but those students who may be studying liberal arts, the philosophy or history student who's been doing coding for 10 or 15 years. Well, let's have them research AI tools, or let's have them do user experience testing. These micro internships are really the core to what we call experiential recruiting. Experiential recruiting is the intersection of employer branding and skills-based hiring. So we talk about employer branding, we're not talking about what kind of swag you have at the career fair, even how well known your company is. Company Nike obviously has an incredibly well-known brand. Every college student has heard of it, but they're probably not thinking about it for AI research. They're not thinking about Nike for data analytics or marketing or strategy or finance. Micro internships help build that employer brand for those types of roles. They also help those companies that may be B2B manufacturing that, again, college students haven't heard of, or the smaller business. This is a great way to get in front of them. The other component is it's skills-based hiring. And again, when we talk about skills-based hiring, it's not about degree versus credential versus something else. It's about helping organizations effectively understand if a candidate has the right skills for the role and allowing the candidate to demonstrate those skills and determine if the role is the right fit for them. And this works because it's built into the process. When organizations are using the micro-internships, every step of the way they're getting insights. They're getting insights on if a candidate is a self-starter and takes agency, if they have real interest in the organization or attention to detail. They're able to figure out, is that student coachable? Are they turning in work on time? How are their communication skills? Or the work product itself? Again, it could be skills like professionalism or problem solving, which are vital for every role, but it could also be the role-specific skills like in some of the examples I gave. So next part of the presentation, we're going to talk about 4 different ways that you can put this right into your campus recruiting. Again, whether it's for those organizations that haven't been on campus yet, how can you use this? For those that have, how can you use this to keep the amazing Texas State students warm when you're evaluating candidates to get insights? And again, if you can't visit the campus. So in the first example, this is one of the preeminent healthcare organizations. It's a massive hospital system. They were facing a couple of key challenges. First, huge shortage of students for allied health roles. Again, think x-ray technician, phlebotomist, etc. They were facing massive competition when recruiting for those roles. How could they build a competitive advantage? They were also interested in driving interest by students who weren't yet studying healthcare. They could be students who are first or second year that weren't thinking about the industry, but also students who are studying marketing or finance or HR that may have preconceived notions about a hospital system and if there will be opportunities. So before visiting campus, this organization posted some micro-internships. Again, some were tied to allied health, some were tied to those other roles. And what happened was, before they set foot on the campus, they already had a pool of students who were excited. They were excited to visit the booth or the info session. And again, not just those who were already studying allied health and were excited to apply to full-time roles at HCA, but those other students as well. The students who were undeclared majors or students who were interested in HR where HCA may have had those roles. The projects were also a differentiator, not just to get them to the booth, but once they were at that career fair booth. It wasn't just the rehashing of what was on a company's resume or the here's my resume, let me give you, I said that backwards, what's on the company's website, or here's my resume, let me give you the elevator pitch. They were able to discuss the real projects, the real experiences, which is what the students wanted. HCA also had insights on the students up front. Again, before setting foot on campus, they knew which students were authentically interested and who had the right skills or geographic ties or other things. So again, HCA was initially focused on before campus. What about keeping students warm after? Well, this was a global medical device company that was having some challenges. Again, challenges because they would meet students at the event, but their hiring process was a little bit delayed. They were also looking to keep students warm who may have been, again, the first or second year students or the juniors or seniors. And one of the things they found, which we all know, is students aren't responding to the blast emails after the event. And we know students don't really want to go to yet another info session or virtual info session hosted by a company. So what this organization did was they took a different approach. They focused on one very specific role. It was a high volume business development role that they were always trying to fill. And they initially focused on students who had, again, certain geographic ties, had connections to their office locations in Andover and Memphis, Tennessee, and Austin, Texas. They were also really interested in students with skills in mechanical engineering and also student athletes. So when students with those profiles were showing up to the booth, this organization was trying to say, how do we keep them warm? How do we differentiate ourselves? So what we did was we created a business audition, or business development audition micro-internship, if you will. Again, essentially it was take one of this organization's products, do some research on it using public info, and create a 5-page business development deck that they could use going and presenting to a prospect. Again, really interesting project, didn't require the organization to share anything, and it was crafted both to keep the students warm after the event because it was interesting and help them learn about the company, but it was also used to help hiring managers assess the skills. So after the event, they sent the email and invited students to participate. First of all, from the traditional metric perspective, it was a wild success. The email open rates were off the charts, click-through, participation, et cetera, et cetera. But beyond that, they found the other metrics were off the charts. They were able to quickly determine who is the best fit, not based upon sort of GPA or major or how well someone even interviewed, but based upon the actual skills. And they were able to focus on those candidates. This company's been doing it for a few years. In the first year they did it, about 2 years ago, they made offers to students who accepted. 100% of the students who accepted the full-time role are still with this company 2 years later. 100%. Go back to, again, first year hires, typically for 50% turnover, tends to be 70 or 80% for business development. This company had 100% retention and similar metrics for the next 2 classes. In addition, the hiring managers loved it. In the words of the hiring manager, they didn't quote unquote waste time interviewing the wrong folks. And they were able to, in those interviews, discuss the student's approach to sort of evaluating the product. So when they were hired, they had confidence it was the right hire. Which brings us to the third example. It's about sourcing and selection. So this company is a very, very well-known national fitness chain. They had huge issues recruiting actually for their HR department itself. They were getting stacks of resume. Again, think about the application avalanche we've all seen. And they were spending a ton of time flipping through. And unfortunately, most of the resumes were coming from people either interested in their franchise locations, so again, being a trainer or HR at one of those locations, as opposed to the corporate roles, or they just weren't qualified. So this organization took a completely different approach. So as opposed to starting with a job description for a full-time role, what they did is they went to hiring managers and presented something as a perk. They said, hiring managers, we're going to give you access to a resource to get help on small projects you have on your own plate. Think articles that need to be written, research that needs to get done, job specs that need to get updated. We call these the we should and I shouldn't tasks that we all have. And what they did was, for the hiring managers, they loved it. Here was a great way to get help on those small projects. But what they also did from a recruiting perspective is it built this always on candidate pipeline for when they needed it. So one of those specific projects was something needed by the learning and development organization within that company. They needed help researching best practices for new hire onboarding. They wanted to do some comparisons with their own practices. So they actually posted the project and selected 2 different students. One was a HR major with a 3.9 GPA. The other was actually a liberal arts student with a lower GPA, but there was something about the answer to the question that stood out. Here's what happened. I'm sure you can see where this is going to go. The student with the 3.9 GPA HR major turned in the work at the top. There's some good information in here, but there's some typos, some grammatical errors, not really presented particularly well. The student who had the lower GPA and sort of the liberal arts major demonstrated that not just could she quickly pick up the technical aspects of HR, again, do the research, she was also able to show problem solving, communication. And again, one thing that shouldn't be ignored is empathy. Just looking at the deliverable, she could empathize with how a hiring manager, how a professional is going to want to look at information. They want to be presented in a way that's easy to understand. Fast forward, this started off as the L&D just having a project that needed to get done, and ultimately wound up hiring the student for a summer internship, and a year and a half later, she's there at a full-time role still. And in the words of the hiring manager, this is probably not someone we would have interviewed through our traditional process, and now she's a rock star. So in the last example, we're going to talk about data to help companies guide their decisions about campus recruiting, but also data to demonstrate the work that you do internally, which is so important right now, given all of the attacks on early career programs. So this global Fortune 500 company had a very, very small campus effort. They couldn't be at all of the schools. In fact, they were only at a couple. And not only were they trying to defend their existing effort, they were trying to scale it. So one of the things they did was they focused on some key strategic goals, both tied to geography. So how can they find students with ties to various locations in areas like Texarkana or Rockford, Illinois, or Holland, Michigan? But one of the things they also did was they focused on some of their community initiatives, like gender equity within STEM. So again, similar to the other examples, we crafted some projects that aligned to full-time roles, but as opposed to going to a specific department or putting it out there broadly, they went to one of their employee resource groups and said, we're going to give you access to, again, a perk where you can work with students from backgrounds similar to your own and give them the projects. First of all, the members of the ERG thought it was the greatest thing. Here's an opportunity that shows this company really cares about diversity, not just the banners and the t-shirts, but actually creating these pathways. They also captured the data to help their campus recruiting overall, whether or not they could be on campus, but also to demonstrate internally the benefits, which was pretty cool. They allowed us to share actual numbers about their cost per school, is what it wound up being compared to some of the industry averages. And while they wouldn't let us share the actual data about cost per hire, we are allowed to share it was a 70% plus cost savings. One of the most interesting things about this as well is they started off, as I said, with one of the ERGs, where there were representatives from marketing and sales and HR and all these different departments. Once this program got kicked off, leadership of those various departments was actually going to HR saying, can we use this across our department? In fact, we'll even pay. When does that ever happen with an HR initiative? The department saw the real value, both as an on-demand resource, but also to support the recruiting efforts. And I think that's because the impact is real. Again, 80% of the students selected for micro-internships come from populations underrepresented in the workforce. And when we talk about that, we're not getting into any of the current noise around DEI or not. We're including things like veteran, Pell eligible, first gen, adult learners. Again, creating truly equitable pathways, not just because it's the right thing to do, but it helps companies make sure that they're not missing great candidates. We found it lowers cost per hire, again, typically 40 to 80% savings, and first year retention on average is about 98%. So when you're posting micro internships, not only is it the individual projects, but you're getting access to all of the tools, helping you build that employer brand in Texas State, helping save time when you're building the relationships or keeping the students engaged, better outcomes when it's leading to a full-time hire. So my suggestion to everyone on how to get started is pretty easy. Send us a job description. Use the link that's in the chat, or let me copy the link and put it in the chat. Use the link that I'm going to put in the chat or the QR code, and email us or use the link to send us a job description for a full-time role or a summer internship. Could be a PDF or a link or just bullet points. One of the things we'll do for you is we'll make suggestions of specific micro internships that we think will be pretty effective. And our team loves to be challenged. We've been doing this a long time. So please don't be bashful. Send us the most difficult job you have, the one that you think there's no way this will work, or the one that you're always struggling to fill. Maybe it's a difficult location or a role that's highly competitive or anything else. We love it. We love doing this. Or it might just be a project you have on your own plate. One of those we shoulds or I shouldn'ts that you don't have time to get done or isn't the best use of time. And again, we're happy to craft it. And then think about how it can tie to what you're already doing. Again, if you haven't yet been to campus at Texas State, what a great way to build a pipeline of students and drive excitement. Or maybe you were there. What a great opportunity to keep those students warm, the ones you met at the class or the career fair. Maybe it's you're thinking about the future and looking to figure out ways to evaluate candidates, or maybe you weren't able to be on campus this year. These are all great ways to leverage this resource. And again, it's truly an honor to collaborate with the team at Texas State on this. So with that, I'm going to take a sip of coffee. Peyton or Amanda, anything I missed or that you want to add?
I don't think so. I can start us off with a question, just to,
Please.
that way everyone can think in case they have questions. I'm curious what the average time is. So let's say an employer sends a job description, works with you guys, creates a Parker Dewey or a micro internship, finds a student, and then there's some live interaction, right? So how much time on average does a hiring manager have to dedicate to this? I would assume one meeting with the student at least, but probably more maybe, and explaining the project. What outside of that? Does that make sense?
I love that question. I love it. We have an internal term for what you were hitting on. The internal term is called Jeff proof. Everything we do needs to be Jeff proof. It needs to be easy enough that Jeff, as a hiring manager or a recruiting leader, would do it. So let me get to the meat of your question. First of all, when organizations send us a job description, we'll typically give them a micro internship or two suggestions back, typically same day, no longer than 24 hours. You will have suggestions, we can get them posted, they can refine, etc. Once the project is posted, we typically say leave it up for about 24, 48 hours, sometimes 72 hours. It's pretty quick. And again, the only reason sometimes it takes that long is it might be a weekend, so a student's not logging in as frequently. We found that every student also gets in their own rhythm. Some log in every day at breakfast. Some log in once every other day. So again, we find 24, 48 at the tail end, 72 hours is long enough to get a nice mix of candidates. Typically, kickoff will happen pretty quickly thereafter. Once you select a student for a project, it is up to you, Amanda, to decide how much or how little you want to interact with them. So we do have some companies where the description is pretty well built out and pretty detailed, and they say, do you know what, Amanda, send me your work product when you're done. That's it. Now, behind the scenes, Parker Dewey is supporting the student. We're giving various nudges. We're encouraging them to go talk to faculty members, go reach out to alum as you're doing your research. Again, they have all of these great resources that Texas State provides. So we're encouraging them to use it, even if they're not sort of having that engagement with the employers. That said, most employers want to have engagement. Again, when I'm working with micro interns myself, what I'll typically do is select whether it's 1 or 5 or 10. I'll typically say, Amanda, Peyton, I'm excited to work with you. Let's hop on a quick Zoom call. Let's schedule 15 minutes. Want to make sure I'm clear about what the deliverables are. Want to answer any questions. Sometimes they do it over email, but again, it's up to the employer. Again, we don't want this to add to the workload of a busy professional. I find the 15-minute Zoom call tends to be really effective. The students tend to have really insightful, thoughtful questions that actually get me thinking about the project sometimes differently. The student will do the work. Again, it's up to the professional if they say, Amanda, when you do a first draft, email it to me, or just send me a finished product, or let's check in a week. Again, up to them. When the project is done, student submits the work. Amanda marks it as complete on the Parker Dewey profile and leaves feedback. Really, really, really simple. Again, by design. Now, we have some companies where they say, do you know, Amanda, you did a great job. I'd love you to come in and present in our office to a team. Or I'd love to schedule a Zoom for you to present to the team. Great. Again, that can happen. We see all different flavors of it. And sometimes it depends on what the employer wants. The last thing I will say on that topic, and again, assuming I answered all of it with my ramble, is typical micro internship takes a student between a few days to a few weeks to kick off, or to complete, I should say. And that again depends on what the employer wants. So for instance, it's Thursday. I'm going to a conference next week. I need someone to help me crunch the list, and uh-oh, I waited too long. I can post that project today. I can pick someone tomorrow, and I can say, I have a list of 20 companies. I only want students who have time to do it over the weekend. And I literally can get the work back on Sunday or Monday. Again, it's going to be a smaller applicant pool because some of the students may say, I have finals or term papers or something else. But there are students who say, yeah, I have time and I want to get it done. Again, that's certainly possible. The vast majority, though, are typically a few weeks out. So I need you to do this research. It's due in 2 weeks. Awesome. Did that answer your question, Amanda?
Yeah, definitely. Thank you.
The Jeff proof point is actually really important. I mean, all tongue-in-cheek joking aside, this is by design. Whether it's how do I post a project? I don't want to think about what one looks like. Great, we'll take that off your plate. Whether it's around HR burden. So for any of the folks here that might be alumni or just busy professionals that aren't focused on recruiting, or even if you are, we've taken that off the table. As I said before, we're the employer of record. There's no 1099 or W-2. As the general counsel of JP Morgan said, think about us like Kinko's. And I was at first offended when he said it. I'm like, no, I'm not making copies. They're doing professional. It's like, you're missing the point. We go into Kinko's. We have no formal relationship with either the store or the person making the copies. They're just making copies for us, and we're putting it on our credit. We're designed very much that same way. Again, making it easy. And in the same way, there's no temp to perm fee. Again, we wanted to remove friction. It's also worth noting all of the students are under NDA. You own all of the work product. We guarantee the outcomes of the project. Again, Jeff proof. Really, really easy. What other questions do we have?
Jeff, another question that comes to mind is, are there certain times of year that you all see more micro-internships posted?
No, I wish it would make my life easier if there was a certain time of year, certain industry, or certain department, or it's all over. It is all over. And some of it depends on what the companies are trying to accomplish. So again, if it's just a busy professional that has too much on his or her plate, those things happen year round. So it doesn't matter. Some of it is much more tied to, again, company strategy. So we'll see a lot in August or September tied to the before the career fair, before on campus, how do I build a pipeline? We're seeing a ton November, December focused on keep warm. We met all these students at the career fair. How do we keep them engaged, whether it's first or second year students, because the companies are thinking about the pipeline for next year, or it could be juniors and seniors. We're seeing a lot right now also called, I can't think of a better name for it, the Plan B. So we are concerned that we're either going to have renegs this year, or we have uncertainty about what our needs for summer interns or full-time hires will be in May or June. Let's post projects now so we have a pool of interested, engaged, qualified candidates for if and when we need them. The other thing we're seeing a lot of right now, and we'll probably continue to see through January, February of prior years, are an effective signal, is a lot of companies feel like they've fallen behind. So those massive companies, the ones that hire thousands every year, think the Accentures, the Deloittes, the investment banks, the massive companies tend to be pretty much done before winter break. Most other companies don't really know what they're going to need. So we see a lot of organizations that are doing it now, saying, okay, we're not going to be ready to recruit for full-time until January, February, March. Let's use this to, again, drive interest and build the pipeline so we don't fall behind. And all of those are valuable. And for students, it's the same thing. We see a lot of students who are highly, highly, highly interested in working on projects during Thanksgiving and winter break. But we also see students who want to do them throughout the year. So again, think about the average college student, assuming it's not finals week, how many hours a week are they spending sitting on their couch? They want to be working on these projects. They want to be building their resume. They want to be getting these experiences. And one of the things I always talk about is the project showcase agency of the students. Back to, I think, where I started, where we don't let any college or university require it. 100% of the students are here because they want to be here. That's a great way for an organization, for an employer to assess, does Peyton have agency? Does she take ownership of her career path? Is she motivated to come and participate on this versus sitting on the couch watching The Simpsons like I did in college? Simpsons are still on, so I didn't date myself too badly. Any other questions? Did I do okay? Awesome.
Yeah, I think this is very helpful, very informative. Thank you.
Yeah, and again, my takeaway for the folks on the call, this is designed to be easy. So again, you have a small project on your own plate that we should or I shouldn't. Great. Use the QR code or the link, send it to us. We're happy to help. And we know the Texas State students will do an amazing job. Whether you're a company that's already recruiting at Texas State, what a great way to amplify what you're doing and to deepen the relationship with the school and get a competitive advantage in recruiting their students. Great opportunity. As I think Amanda said at the beginning of the call, what about all of those students who might not be able to participate in your summer internship or your co-op because they're working part-time or full-time? What a great way to make sure you don't miss out on them. Those are individuals that have those core skills that we're looking for. Again, the grit, the problem solving, these, like, this fits right into what you're doing. And again, please don't be bashful. Let us know if you have questions. Let us know if you're not sure about anything. If you're trying to think about how this hits with a very specific need, maybe not a specific job, but a specific objective you have. We love working with companies on this stuff. So unless there are any other questions, thank you everyone for being so generous with your time. Amanda, Peyton, anything you want to say to close us out?
I think you've covered everything really great. I've got a lot of things to think about. I think just reach out to us if there are any questions, and we can always get you into contact with Parker Dewey or go directly to the link like Jeff had. Thank y'all for being here.
Thank you. And thank you again for the opportunity, Amanda and Peyton. It truly is it's a real honor to partner with you all. You guys are doing such amazing work. Your students are incredible. Your team's incredible. We just love how this creates win-wins for your employer partners, for your alumni, for the school, and for the students, obviously. So thank you so much.
Let's see what comes of it. Thank you so much. Have a good one.
You too. Bye.
Bye.